With the X Factor podcast. Today's guest is Shola Richards, CEO and founder of Go Together Global, and is a widely sought after workplace civility expert who speaks, coaches, consults on, you guessed it, civility. He is the author of several best-selling books, including Making Work Work and Go Together, and has been featured on the Today Show, CBS, Forbes, Black Enterprise, among other venues. And he's been invited to speak before multiple organizations, from Fortune 50 companies to top universities, as well as on the TEDx stage, and on 3 different continents. In 2021, Shola was invited to testify in front of the House of Representatives on Capitol Hill to share his expert recommendations on how to bring more civility to Congress. As if. Good work if you can get it. Anyway, today, Shola joins us to discuss his latest book, Civil Unity, The Radical Path to Transform Our Discourse, Our Lives, and Our World. Shola happens to be actually on the tail end of a whirlwind book tour. So I really appreciate, Shola, that you've taken the time to speak with us today from where? Los Angeles, California?
Los Angeles, California, my brother. It's a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you. Pleasure to see you again. About a year ago, Shola came on another podcast I did, and we found out that we're both girl dads and hoop fanatics. And Shola, let me ask you, is there any greater testament to civility than the fact we support different teams? You're a Lakers fan. I'm a Knicks fan.
Yep.
And we're both able to have a modicum of respect for a shared rival, the Boston Celtics. I think that speaks volumes.
I mean, really, what is it? Like, the enemy of my enemy is my friend?
Yes.
You know, it's like, that's kind of how this works, because being a Knicks fan and being a Lakers fan is kind of like, we're already divided bi-coastally, but the shared hatred for the Boston Celtics, our world champion Boston Celtics, which breaks my heart every single time. It allows us to have a deeper connection, Charles, around just taking them out this year.
Yeah, no, exactly. Although I will say, and we could turn this easily into an NBA podcast, but
my God.
But we're gonna try very hard not to.
Try. Let's put that, because there's always a way to bring in the NBA almost to anything. So we'll see how it goes.
We'll see how it goes. But I will say this about the Boston Celtics. Individually, I really like that team. Bunch of really good, high character guys. So
almost a franchise and fan thing for me. It's like, I just want this is the Boston Celtics fans are insufferable. So yeah. Yes. Sorry, any Boston Celtics fans listening to this. I just got to say, let's throw it out there.
Yes. We'll agree to agree on that. I have to say, Shola, I was really, really taken with your book. I know I shared my immediate comments privately with you. The courage in relating several formative and transformative painful experiences. And also you provide an analysis and additional, and even more so, some strategic and tactical guidance to practice and develop civility. So it's an amazing book in that it's multidimensional. In an unvarnished, completely transparent, and again, courageous way, you share a couple of these transformative and painful experience, how it informs your work, your life, some of the struggles, challenges you've had. But again, you sort of lay out some really great how-tos on developing civility as if you could develop a talent for playing the piano. Just that kind of a thing.
It's funny. First of all, such kind words, Charles. Thanks for that. I mean, one of the things that's frustrating to me is we can see, like, regardless of when this podcast episode drops, we're going to be in a situation where civility is like circling the drain, like how we're treating each other, how we're showing up for each other. And I wanted to create something where there's going to be no excuses as to why we can't do it. So to have something that's super tactical, very practical, and accessible. So you don't have to have like more degrees than a thermometer to be able to understand what I'm writing about. I mean, really basic stuff. But by basic, I want to be super clear. None of the stuff I'm talking about is easy. It requires us to lean into some aspects of emotional intelligence, intellectual humility, critical thinking, the things that are going to allow us to be a more engaged citizen, to create more civility. And it's not around just like politeness for politeness sake, because that solves nothing. It's around creating the space that's going to allow us to have really in-depth, spirited conversations where we can learn how to disagree without disrespect. And quite frankly, bridge some divides that we've created over the past decade that we need to try to find a way to close.
Yeah, it is interesting, and this is, again, not an NBA podcast, nor is it a political
I'm
podcast.
ready for it. I'm here for it.
Nor is it a political podcast, but I think it's safe to say that after this election, people are feeling a certain way. There is a lot of rawness out there, and I see it on LinkedIn. I see it in some of the social media platforms I'm involved in, perhaps obsessively so. And so your message, while your book tour may be winding down, I'd have to think that demand for your speaking and interest in your book is going to be significant and will spike significantly in the next several weeks, if not months and perhaps years.
I think so. It's because from what I'm seeing is that a lot of folks are like, so now what? So now what is like the thing that I keep hearing the most? It's like, I don't know how to move forward. I mean, I've run into so many people where families are divided over politics and they don't know exactly. I mean, this is before Thanksgiving, but I already predicted long before this that this upcoming Thanksgiving will be one of the most contentious Thanksgivings ever, maybe. So folks are really struggling. Like, I don't know how to talk to my mom who voted this way and I voted that way and I don't respect her for voting this way and she doesn't respect me, but we still got to share a house for this Thanksgiving dinner. What are we going to do?
Right.
So all these require me to have some sort of practical tips that you can use to navigate that, but not just that, but workplace situations, your own private mental health, all these things that are allow us to show up as our best selves from a civil standpoint.
It's kind of interesting. I've spoken to people, I've had people on the podcast. A couple of them talk about teaching people to have a sense of humor. And I still don't buy that, but you make a very, very persuasive case that you can inculcate and cultivate civility. So again, it's an amazingly timely book. So let me back up a little bit, Shola. You refer to yourself as a kindness extremist. What separates a kindness extremist from a person who's generally considered kind, but not extreme?
Yeah, so great question. I'll couch it a little bit. So really quickly, a definition between nice and kind, because those two words are used interchangeably. Then I'll separate kind from a kindness extremist. So nice, by definition, this is being polite and agreeable, which hopefully we can agree is like a super low bar. Like the worst human beings on earth can say please or thank you.
Right.
Kindness is demonstrating through your action that you genuinely care about another human being. And it's harder. Kind people have difficult conversations. They hold people accountable. They have firm boundaries. These are things that kind folks do. I think what I'm leaning into is this idea of being a kindness extremist, because even being kind, oftentimes we save that kindness for people who can benefit us in some way. Like, I'll be kind to my boss. I'll be kind to my highest paying client. I'll be kind to my wife or my husband or my kids. But kindness that I'm advocating for is the harder stuff. Can you be kind to people who don't look like you, don't pray like you do, don't vote like you do? Are you able to be kind? Because being kind when it's easy, to me, is just baseline stuff. What happens when you're under-caffeinated and you're exhausted and you're overworked? Can you still find the ability to be kind then? This is what a kindness extremist does. It's a difference between a behavior and who you actually choose to be. So that's what I lean into, doing it when it's hard, because extreme behaviors of kindness are going to be needed now more than ever. The kindness to our loved ones and to people who live in our neighborhood who we know, awesome. But extending that to all people, especially the ones who you feel maybe don't deserve it, is way harder. And that's what a kindness extremist is. And I'm trying to lean into that energy going forward in 2024 and beyond.
Yeah. So it's kindness, but it's also an engagement and a genuine listening, if you will.
It's an inconvenient kindness too, Charles. It's like not just the easy stuff. Like it's like it'd be so much easier for me to be a jerk right now. I'm starving. You brought my food out and it's the wrong order. I'm going to scream at you right now. Like, no, can you find a way to have the impulse control and emotional maturity to lean into that really extreme level of kindness, which is kind of rare these days.
Yeah. No, well said. This is a big question. How do you
Uh-oh.
define, not too big, you can handle it.
Can I?
I know.
We'll see.
Absolutely. Let me find an appropriate basketball analogy. I
Ooh,
wouldn't say it's a
please.
spot up three. It probably requires a fairly sophisticated action, but I think you could handle it. You're going to
Okay.
get the ball in a pretty good position to score. Okay.
I
How
mean,
about that?
hand in the face or off the dribble? We're just talking to spot up
Well,
specifically.
no, it's not a spot. Maybe a dribble handoff,
Okay.
something like that. You still
Okay.
have to beat your man, and it'll be contested.
But I'm a clean. Oh, so it's not going to be a clean
But
look.
it's going to be a bucket.
Okay, it's going to be a bucket. Then we're good.
It's going to be a bucket. Okay. How do you define civility?
I define civility as the active demonstration of respect and the ability to disagree without disrespect. So there's kind of two parts to the definition. The active demonstration of respect, I think the one thing that I see traveling internationally is that most people are like, dude, we are not able to respect one another. And it's affecting everything from our work to our families, to our communities, our politics, our own mental health. So there's that aspect of it, the active demonstration of respect and the ability to disagree without disrespect. You don't have to spend a whole lot of time on social media to see like people just when you wade into the comment section of anything that's even slightly political, the name calling comes out. People start talking trash, and it's wild that we can't get to a point where I can sit across from someone who I disagree with, vehemently disagree with, but still just focus on the topic at hand without attacking the person who has these beliefs. It is so rare to do this in this day and age. I think it makes us kind of like a unicorn if you're willing to do this and lean into it. So that's my definition of it. And civil unity is the idea of unifying as many humans as possible around that definition of civility and putting that into actual action.
By the way, there is talking trash and talking trash. I think we can agree that
There is. And I think talking trash is one of my favorite things to do because I'm a sports guy. We both are. So like talking trash, people are like, so wait a second, you talked about my Knicks and you said that they suck. That's not
right.
civil. No, we're back and forth. We're having fun debate. Right. That's what it's all about. It doesn't mean everything be buttoned up and everything has to be polite and please and thank you. It's just not about being harmful and hateful and damaging others and hurting people. Like that's what we're talking about. Back and forth trash talk is like how you build civility in my humble opinion.
Yeah. I mean, it never gets as bad as Kevin Garnett.
Well, he's talk. Borderline like sociopathic and in the best way possible. But like this guy is like the way that again, it has Lakers Celtics 2008 final. I of course did not work out very well for me, but watching him, he was like in a different world. Like he was like talking to himself. He's like talking to the basketball stanchion and like
right. He bangs his head on the stanchion.
Yeah, and he's like yelling at it like it's another human being. Like I've never seen that level of intensity. And I'm a Kobe guy. That was next level for me.
Right. Oh yeah. No, he's psychotic.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to put it.
Yes. Another big question, and you kind of touched on this already, but what is the number one myth regarding civility?
Yeah, I think the biggest myth of civility, and you're right, kind of touching on it, but let's go a little deeper, is this idea that like people feel like in order to be civil, you have to like accept the awfulness of the world and not put up a fight and just agree to disagree on everything and no, after you. Like this idea that we don't have strong opinions. I got into it with this gentleman who like is in my follows me on my email newsletter, and I shared who I was voting for in the election, and he's like, "Wow, this is so uncivil that you said who you're voting for, and clearly you didn't think about me, and I voted differently than you." Like, my guy, like this doesn't mean I can't have civility doesn't mean I can't have an opinion. Like, what type of world we live in if I can't have any thoughts that are of my own, right? Of course you can have opinions. My thing is it's not about this simple idea that we can't fight for our ideas. We should, but it's how we're choosing to fight that's the problem. Can we fight with respect? Can we fight with civility? Can I fight with you and still see your humanity? That's what I'm talking about. It doesn't mean you can't have an opinion. Of course you're going to have an opinion. We have to have opinions. But the myth of like civility means put your head down, be agreeable, and don't have any strong takes on anything, because if you do, you're going to rock the boat, is unfortunate, dated, and quite frankly, dangerous. I don't think it's very helpful.
Yeah, and right. And it doesn't really give rise to real conversation between and among real people. Everybody's pulling their punches, and that's not a world, look, yes, for instance, I think you and I at one point talked about the term political correctness.
Yeah, we did.
I don't see how anybody can argue that it's an important and vital thing that we respect differences. Of course, people overcorrect and take an extreme view. And of course, you throw the baby out with the bathwater. So all of a sudden it becomes a toxic term. But no, it's also the ability to read a room, to know how far you can take something. And I think also you make a case that, you talk about emotional intelligence, that also can be learned. It's an intuitive thing, but I think even that can be cultivated.
Absolutely. I mean, I think emotional intelligence, and that's what I'm kind of thinking about with civility as well, as you mentioned at the top of the pod, is like, it's a skill that you can learn, like learning the piano or learning how to shoot a jump shot or what have you. But it is around emotional intelligence, which is something that you can learn. You can learn to be more self-aware. You can learn how to read a room. You can learn how to communicate in a way that doesn't have people like, whoa. It just requires you to take that first step to be like, there's stuff that I actually need to learn here and I can get better. But if you do have that dedication, there's no reason why you can't do it.
Yeah.
Bottom line, if hatefulness can be learned and intolerance can be learned, the good things like emotional intelligence and kindness can be learned as well.
Yeah, it may be a little bit harder.
In some cases.
It requires a little bit more work, I think. Just like I think anger could be more easily stoked and activated. When you want to propose certain solutions to shared problems, it requires an explanation, and it's just a more difficult process. And that's why I think a lot of the political discourse is reaching to find ways to stoke that anger. It's just simply easier to get there.
It's primal. Yeah, it is. I mean, but I do believe that if you do care enough, and that's a huge if, to be clear, that like, this isn't working for me, I got to try something else, then it can be learned. It's a skill that some people are like, oh, you either have it or you don't. No, you can definitely stoke that and learn it if you do put in the effort to try.
That's the key though, right?
You
need to want to do that. You need to want to put in the work, and a lot of people don't.
No, there's a lot of benefit not to do it, right? Just fall into your tribes and feel like, those other people are the ones that are the problem. We're cool. They're not. And we can just be angry together. And that's really sad and unfortunate, but really too easy to get into that. That's why I'm trying to push this out there saying, hey, wait, over here, there's another way. I promise. Check this out. It works.
Yeah.
So
no, for sure. For sure. Again, not to get too political here, but some of the postmortems talk about, for instance, the Democrats. You need to take these conversations into uncomfortable places, sometimes into hostile territory.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to know how to negotiate that. And the same thing in business or or civil discourse, you need to sometimes do that, or sometimes you're going to find yourself there. And you need to know how to negotiate that.
If all we're doing is talking to people who look like us, pray like us, vote like us, or whatever, then we're not really stretching ourselves. I mean, the idea of going into territory that may not be as opening and as openly welcoming of our views is a powerful place to be, because then you have an opportunity to really try to find some common ground. I know in this weird, toxic world of like for-profit media, there's a lot of manipulation and weird stuff that goes on and trying to make things not on good faith. But if you do find like a family member or a person who you can speak to in good faith, who may be ideologically opposite from you, that's an opportunity to test this and try this and put these civility muscles to work. You're not going to do it by lifting a 3-pound weight. You got to get in there and get some 25s, 35s, 45s, the hard stuff, so you can actually see yourself grow in some way.
Yeah, for sure. Next question sort of dovetails with what we're talking about here. At the end of each chapter, you have a section dedicated to ICIs, essentially a game plan to, quote, disagree agreeably. Shola, if you would explain what ICI stands for and how it could be implemented to promote civil discourse, particularly when all indications are that the exchange is veering off in an uncomfortable direction.
Yeah, so ICIs are my attempt to make civil unity a very practical guide that you can use. So ICI stands for, the first one is intentional. So this is the one thing where we are intentionally taking action, deliberately doing something in the benefit of a goal, which I'm going to explain in a moment. C is consistent. So you're going to be doing this really, really consistently, this action. So the first thing you're doing intentionally, deliberately. Consistent, you're doing it over and over again. And the I is for intervention, which is meant to interrupt some sort of behavior that you do not want to see. So I'll give you an example. There's so many different ICIs in the book. There's 26 of them, ranging from how to manage your emotions when you are being triggered instantly to how to manage a conversation that could be kind of veering off track. I'll just give you a really simple example of one. One ICI is called setting the ground rules. So for example, depending on when this pod drops, if it's before Thanksgiving, or even the holidays, you may have a situation where you're having a holiday dinner and Uncle George, let's use as an example, is proudly spouting that he is his candidate won, so he's super excited, and you voted on the other side, so you're very upset by this. And you want to figure out how to navigate this conversation so your whole Thanksgiving dinner doesn't just devolve into name calling and yelling. Setting ground rules is very simple. You just tell Uncle George, hey, Uncle George, before we dive into politics, because this can get really messy, is it cool that I can share my ideas, even if they're not aligned with yours, if we can both agree to stay respectful? So you're challenging Uncle George, like, hey, can we stay respectful, even if my views are different from yours? This is a powerful thing because Uncle George has a couple options, like, screw you, if you voted for her, you're a liberal snowflake. Okay, well, then we're done, right? The conversation's over.
Right.
But if Uncle George's like, hey, listen, yeah, sure, let's do it, let's talk. Then you can share your discussion couched in this idea around staying respectful. And it doesn't mean that minds need to be changed. It doesn't mean that we need to get everyone on the same side, but we're challenging Uncle George and anyone else that we can have polarizing conversations without demonizing, dehumanizing, and disrespecting. That's really the idea. And there's so many of those ICIs. We're doing this intentionally. We're going to be doing this consistently. And this I is an intervention to stop the conversation from going off the rails.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I want to talk to you about several other strategies
Please.
that you discuss in the book. First, you talk about, quote, building your squad. What do you mean by this?
So building your squad is kind of a way to reframe this idea around resilience. People are like, resilience is grit, suck it up, buttercup, quit being a baby, this intentional, only by yourself individual act. And it's just science does not bear that out. So what it is to be truly resilient, you have to have a crew. And 3 areas where you need to have people in your life. 1, someone who will feel with you, someone who you can empathize with. And that's what someone will feel with you is. Happens to be my therapist, which I'm happily go every Thursday. So that's my guy. But it could be a family member, a loved one, but you need to have someone who will feel with you, who you have those deeper conversations and really have those empathic connections. Secondly, is someone who will laugh with you. We talk about the importance of a sense of humor over and over again. If you cannot laugh at the world and the ridiculousness of what we're in, it's going to be a really tough slog. And I was sharing with my buddies the other day, man, for people who love to worry, this is a great time to be alive, isn't it? Because there's a lot to be worried about. So you got to laugh. You just have to have a sense of humor. Yes. And third is someone who will stand with you. So you have someone who will have your back when things get really, really hard, that you know that you can lean on, that you can turn to, that you can call in the middle of the night when things get really, really bad, and they're going to be there for you. Those 3 areas that's your crew. Someone who will feel with you, someone who will laugh with you, and someone who will stand with you. And it could be 3 different people. One person can cover all 3, who knows? But the point is you just can't do this alone.
Right. It's funny. I am variations of those things with some of my friends. So I would add another one.
Please.
To a couple of them. One in particular, I'm the guy who says you probably should rethink that. You don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. And because he's always upset with something or someone, and his instinct is to write a letter and to get out in front of it, and he'll run it by me, and 9 out of 10 times I'll tell him, no, not a good idea. I think there are better ways of doing that. You can't by fiat or dictate a certain outcome in a relationship that's organic. You need to figure out some other way of doing it.
That's the part around self-awareness, is that you have to have someone to keep it real with you and tell you, you know what, I love you. And because I love you, that's a really dumb idea. Like, you're going to regret this. That's going to hurt your career. Don't post that on social media. Oh my God, don't yell. Don't call in the manager. Like, someone's going to bring
Right.
you back, because if not, it's like you just left to your own emotional whims, which could be really a dark place to be.
By the way, I've had a couple of occasions where friends have gotten really pissed off at me, and I think I'm doing the right thing and saying what they need to hear. And they get really, really angry and they're like, I'm not going to talk. I say, stop it. You're going to talk to me. You're going to be my friend. Knock it off. I'll talk to you in a couple of days. Once you chill out, we'll be good. We'll talk. All
That's
right.
the kindness stuff, though, Charles. That's what being kind is. Being nice is like, oh, I know he's going to be upset if I say this, so I'm not going to say anything.
Right.
Kindness, like, no, because I care about you, I'm going to let you know this. And you may not like me right now, but you're going to like me longer in the long run, when you realize, yeah, that would have been a really bad move if I did that. So
Right. I
yeah,
mean, yeah. And in 2 days, I may still think you're an idiot, but we'll get over it.
we will, because
We'll
we
get
have
over it.
mutual respect. That's the whole
Right.
idea. Exactly.
Right.
That's what civility is
Right.
all about.
Right.
Exactly.
Um, Getting back to some of these other strategies, you talk about cognitive reframing. How does that work?
So cognitive reframing is just this interesting idea of when it kind of like, in a sense, kind of like what we were just talking about just now. So if you have a friend who's like really angry and freaking out and about to do something, like, you come in and be like, hey, hold on, friend. There may be another way to look at this that could better serve you. Instead of just being like, he's an idiot and she's this, like, hold on, like someone cuts you off in traffic, right? It's like, oh my God, this guy's a terrible driver. What the heck's he doing? But really, maybe this person was like rushing to get to the hospital or something, or finding a way not to just, maybe the best way to summarize this is like always assuming best intent. Now, I know oftentimes there's some folks who have bad and ill intent, which is fair, but finding a way to reframe something that better serves you, instead of just being like, the whole world's, everyone's awful, everyone's self-centered and only thinks about themselves. Like, hold on. Is there another way to look at this? It's like choosing curiosity over judgment. It's something that, when you think about that situation with your friend who is acting in a way and you're that person who's like, hey, hold on, like, this may not work out for you long term. That's a way of kind of reframing it. So we're not always just going to like this dark place
Yeah.
where everyone is bad and ill intent.
It's interesting. I don't necessarily want in those situations, now that we're talking about it, and in that specific instance, if somebody cut you off, I don't convert what I'm sensing is a bad, or I'm ascribing a bad intention and converting it to a good one. I'm just saying there's no intention at all.
In some cases, yeah.
In some cases, it's just a figment of our imagination. Somebody is acting out. You happen to be an unintended consequence of that action. And in that case, they don't know you. You've not necessarily done anything. It's a totally impersonal thing. So I just automatically default to, well, there's no intention at all. I
In
just
some
happen to
cases,
be.
yeah, and I can go with that. I think sometimes folks, kind of go back to what we were talking about earlier. It's just like sometimes they just behave in a way that doesn't make any sense. But when I'm seeing someone like screaming at like a cashier at a grocery store or something, and this is the hugest part about cognitive reframing. It's not to excuse bad behavior, because I think that also is kind of the bastardized, often awful version of this. Was like, oh, this person is like beating up this person on the street. Well, maybe they had a bad day. Like, no. That's not that's not what
Right,
I'm saying. Like,
right,
the idea, like, we should be like, well, okay, yes, and maybe there's something going on with this person, and they should not be doing this, and I'm going to intervene and stop, or make sure that they understand that it's not okay. So there may be intention or not, but at the end, we have to work with the actions that are in front of us. If they're harmful, we need to address it. But we also could benefit from also trying to frame it from a larger lens of, maybe there's something that we don't know, from a place of curiosity, instead of just assuming we know from judgment.
right. And of course, what you're saying brings to mind the classic, when people tell you who they are, believe
Believe
them.
them.
That comes into play so often. It's crazy.
It does.
You have a section on defeating disinformation, which is a major problem,
Oh,
particularly in
yeah.
today's highly charged political environment that we touched on before. How do we counter this?
Oh, there's a few practical ways to do this. So, some of which is, when you're seeing information, I'll give you an example of one of my all-time favorites, called reading laterally. So when oftentimes we see an article or some sort of piece that we see online, what most people do, they read vertically. So they go to the article, they read the article from beginning to the end, and then they make a judgment. Reading laterally is a little different. So you take the article and you read it, but what you also do is you leave the article. You leave the article and you look at the author or the source, and you do some Googling on this person, learn more about them, see if it's aligned. Go to their website, check the about section, check, sources, resources, what other people are saying about this person. So you can get a better idea of whether this person is credibly able to talk about this topic. That's one thing. So instead of just reading articles at face value, do due diligence. It's a lot more work, obviously, but it's very effective. Another thing you do, of course, is verify. So if you, social media posts and news stations too, are so good at getting people emotionally activated and triggered, right? So the idea is they want to get you into a place of either outrage overload or anxiety overload. They want you in one of those two places. So if you're reading an article, even if it aligns with your beliefs and you're like, oh, I'm so mad about this, that is your cue to be like, hold on, I need to verify this. Let me check on this and see if this is true. And I'm going to go to independent fact checkers. There's a bunch of them, PolitiFact, Snopes.com, all sorts of places that you can go to just see if it's true and cross-reference it. Like if you're seeing a story on social media that's like, whoa, this seems like this should be big news. And why am I seeing it for the first time on like some Facebook group? Then go to like a reputable news source and see, are they reporting it? Is this something that's made it onto like the Associated Press? Because it would be if it was a real story. Right. A perfect example, not bring it back to the NBA, but here we are, was Kobe Bryant. And in January of 2020, when I saw for the first time on social media, like Kobe Bryant just died in a helicopter crash. I'm like, okay, that's ridiculous. And I dismissed it, but it kept showing up on social media. So then I went and I did the due diligence of verifying it. Went to the Associated Press, went to other places. Like, sure enough, I saw that was true. And I wish more people would do the due diligence to do this. But to your point, Charles, we both know we don't live in a world that people seek information. They seek validation. They want to be right. You know what I mean? Exactly. So it's like, this matches how I feel, so I'm done. No need to research any further. So I'm challenging people in this book to do the hard work of reading laterally and doing all these other things.
Yeah, I was going to mention confirmation bias, and we don't have real time to get into that, but you really do a deep dive into all of these cognitive biases.
Oh, I know. Those are fun.
I love that work. I love that stuff. I love that whole field of study. It's fascinating. By the way, I was never a big Kobe fan, but for some reason, I remember exactly where I was, exactly how that went down. I remember I was talking to my friend Paul at that time. It was for some reason, and I can understand why it hit you as it did, being, you're out there in LA, you're a lifelong Laker fan. But for some reason, there was something profound about that. There was something that, it was incredibly an impactful thing.
I've never cried over a celebrity death in my life. I felt sadness, but I was just beside myself. I've never seen a city grieve a person's passing more than Los Angeles grieved Kobe Bryant's passing. It was never seen anything like it ever.
I can imagine. You're just so embedded in that community in so many ways. But also, moving right along, you have a chapter on workplace toxicity, intolerance, and radicalization. What are several of the main takeaways there?
There's so many, around those three. I'll pull out one, because I could literally go and spend the rest of our time on that chapter alone, because that's one of the meatier ones. One thing that I think is worth talking about is radicalization. And I think I'll talk about that because intolerance and workplace incivility are huge issues that require a lot of time. Radicalization is very interesting. So when someone becomes radicalized in some sort of belief or ideology, I hear a lot of people come up to me like, what do? I think my son or my brother or my friend has become radicalized and I do not know what to do about that. So one of the things that I talk about, which is very counterintuitive and very hard for people to put into practice, is what I call radical civility as a way to combat radicalization. So oftentimes what people do is when you see someone who's radicalized, they're screaming at them, calling them dumb, and you're uninformed. What's wrong with you? You're crazy. And that only deepens their belief, which makes it harder for you to reach them. The basis of this is that most bad behavior is an unskilled expression of an unmet need. So that means that what they're receiving from this group that they're radicalized with is they're getting a need met. So by you saying that you're dumb and you shouldn't be a part of that group is not going to work because they're getting a need met that they're not getting met from you. So by being radically civil, what this means is that you're engaging in a conversation with this person. You're listening to them. You're not judging them. You don't need to have a shred of respect for their beliefs at all, or even pretend that you do. But by listening to them and being open and not just saying, you're stupid, what's wrong with you, you idiot? Like, oh, that's interesting. Tell me how you came to believe that. They're now getting a need met, which can open the door for healing and alternative viewpoints. So much that I could get into on that. But the idea is if you do have someone you feel like is kind of going towards that edge of radicalization, shaming them will fail, just like it would for an alcoholic or a drug addict. Instead, you got to give them that respect that they're not receiving elsewhere and let them feel like they don't need to go to a radicalized group to be heard, seen, and respected.
An unskilled expression to an unmet need. It's a really, really elegant way of putting that. And
it is. And it changes the way you kind of look at things when you put it like most behavior is an unskilled expression of most bad behavior is an unskilled expression of an unmet need. And if you look at it that way, there's a way to kind of get to the core of what's going on.
Yeah. And this is a very, very, I think, fairly recent phenomenon, this radicalization.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, to the level that it is now, because there's always been folks that have been, like KKK back in God knows when, but like now it's more because of online groups and ways that you can connect on your smartphone. It's way easier to be a part of these groups now than it ever was.
Yeah, it's, I've used this analogy before, and I'm sure it's not new with me, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, where people look exactly like they used to look, but no, there's something going on behind the eyes.
Mm-hmm. Something going on behind the eyes.
And
something there.
Well, last question, Shola.
Yeah.
Our listeners, no doubt, are wondering how AI factors into all of this. This is, after all, the X Factor podcast. Well, this isn't something you address in your book. AI is going to transform the workforce. Its impact and how we do our jobs, how we interact with each other, and all the other impacts, we can't yet imagine. There's been a lot of talk about the increasing importance of soft skills, communication, collaboration, EQ, et cetera. Where does civility fit into this scenario?
So I think AI and civility have a very interesting relationship, and I think it can be cultivated in ways that maybe some folks don't realize. And I've used it in some ways to help me. So because I can be, even though I wrote a book on this stuff, I can be kind of impulsive sometimes when I'm feeling like, angry and want to let someone know. So I have used AI to help to say, hey, this is how I'm planning on, here's the situation, and here's how I'm planning on communicating. Tell me if you see anything in this that would be maybe considered uncivil. And it can come back to me and be like, yeah, so the way you work, like I had one sentence in an email, like, you know what? So I'm done here. You can have the last word if you want it. I was like, you probably want to remove that sentence. I was like, that's good. So I was like using AI in a sense to help me gain more self-awareness, because they often say, hey, look, when you write an email, leave it for 24 hours and then come back and see how you feel. Well, AI can kind of shorten that, right? So you can be like, here's the email that I'm sending. Let me know if you think this is really accurate. Here's how I normally communicate. So my AI chatbots know how I communicate. So it helps. Does this sound like me? Is this respectful or civil in the way that I define it? Here's some things that are kind of questionable, things to look for. And I love that. So there's so many ways to use AI to help increase the amount of civility. For me, I use it around self-awareness and just making sure that I'm not stepping in it more than I should be.
Well said. Thank you. So we did work AI into this conversation. So,
absolutely. Because AI, it's the future. It's not the future. It's the present. We're here. It's like, so not knowing how to use these tools is just going to limit us in ways that doesn't make any sense. We need to use it and harness it to make the world a better place.
Are you working on your next book?
Hell no.
No.
I need to write another book like I need a hole in my head. It's like the woman after she has a kid. Like, when's the next baby coming? Like, who knows? The world's going to change, and I'll probably find a reason to be inspired in 2025. But as of this moment, the answer is a resounding hell no. I just can't imagine getting down and writing another book right now. Could not do it.
Okay, well, we'll come back to this in 6 months or a year.
We will. Knee deep in book number 4.
Yes, I have a feeling that's going to be the case. Anyway, Shola, this is great. I was looking forward to this conversation. We couldn't be doing this at a better time.
Oh, my guy.
I really appreciate this, man.
Likewise. Appreciate you, Charles. Thanks for having me, man. These type of conversations are so good for not just my mind, but for my spirit. I really need this energy. And I just, that was the fastest 50 minutes I spent in a very long time. Like, I just loved it. I mean, I love talking to you. I just love connecting. You're a very bright guy and just allows for, and truth be told, it's like I do podcast interviews, and for the book tour, you got to do a lot of them. And what sucks is, like, I'd say maybe 40% of the people who interviewed me didn't read the book. It's like, right. So, this civility thing, what's that all about? And didn't ask that thoughtful questions, and I had to kind of course correct, and it was a shitty experience, and I didn't really enjoy it. So this was the antithesis of that. I loved this. I'm so grateful for the time that you took with me. This is just so great.
I may have to use some of this.
Please.
What you're talking right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I might have to.
Oh, okay.
I don't want you to, because we officially ended the conversation.
We did.
Yeah, I'm just warning you. You may actually, these words may come back to haunt you.
It does. When you talk to people who care about the work, what you're doing on this podcast is you're showing respect. It allows me to think about my content too in ways that, like, you write the stuff and then you have to process it, and then you have to take this stuff that you wrote and apply it to this world that we're currently in as we're recording this. It's a great, for me, it's a great intellectual exercise, and I love that. So thank you for challenging me with some really good questions and allowing us to hopefully have something that can open some minds down the road. So I'm grateful.
Oh, same, Shola. As I said at the outset, I was really looking forward to having this conversation and talking with you about your excellent book. It's such a timely topic. I'm really glad we had an opportunity to get into it. Today I spoke with Shola Richards, CEO and founder of Go Together Global. Shola is a widely sought after workplace civility expert who speaks, coaches, and consults on civility. We spoke primarily about his latest book, Civil Unity, The Radical Path to Transform Our Discourse, Our Lives, and Our World. He joined us from his office and home in sunny Los Angeles, California. This is Charles Epstein for the X Factor podcast. Thanks for listening.